Now let's talk about the final stages of World War II concerning the defeat of Japan, which brings an end to the war, and talk a little bit about the aftermath after the war, the creation of the United Nations. Okay, so one of the important factors that led to the defeat of Japan was the use of the atomic bomb. Before this, Japanese cities had already experienced large amounts of bombing, and Japan was possibly at the brink of surrendering. But on the other hand, it also seemed that Japan was willing to sacrifice it all rather than surrender. Okay, so they were just fighting to the bitter end. So the president at the time, Harry Truman, who had took office after the death of President Roosevelt, President Roosevelt actually died while serving his fourth term as president. 4 terms, but he dies in the middle of his fourth term. So now we have a new president, President Harry Truman. He decides to use the atomic bomb to finally break Japan's will, and more as a symbol too, to show off the new power of the United States. Okay, now that we have the atomic bomb. The atomic bomb was created by a group of scientists in the United States, but not just US scientists. You have scientists who immigrated from Europe, from Germany in some examples, from Britain, from Canada, who all come together to work on this project. So yes, this group of scientists come together working under what they call the Manhattan Project. Okay, so the Manhattan Project is this group of scientists who are working on the atomic bomb. They're using Einstein's theory of relativity to create the bomb. And Einstein himself participates. He was an immigrant from Germany, a German scientist who immigrated to the United States during the war. And he had warned the United States, hey, Germany, they're working on an atomic bomb as well. So, you might want to get started on that. And so that's when the US brings together the Manhattan Project. There's this rush, competing to see who could develop the atomic bomb first. Okay, and so the US used the atomic bomb on 2 Japanese cities in 1945, Hiroshima and then Nagasaki. And this is going to result in the deaths of about 140,000 people initially, about 70,000 people in each city. So I'm talking about like initially when the bomb explodes, 70,000 people die in each city. It's mostly civilians who are being killed. Okay, just everyday people, they're not in the war. But it's not just the 70,000 people who die in each city. Many more are going to die because of the radiation of the bomb that contributes to the deaths of thousands more after the initial bombing. Okay, so hundreds of thousands died because of the bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Now, at the same time that this is going on, the Soviet Union is going to declare war on Japan, and they're going to invade Manchuria, which Japan had invaded in 1931, and pretty much this is going to end the war for Japan. Right? It's just too much. Right? You got the atomic bomb exploding over several cities. Bombing's been going on Japan. Japanese cities already for a long period of time. Now you got Russia stepping in, and at that point, the Japanese government is going to surrender. Now, as the war is coming to an end, the leaders of the Allied countries are going to meet in the Soviet Union at the Yalta Conference. And one of the key outcomes of the Yalta Conference was the territorial expansion of the Soviet Union. Right? And this is key because it will expand the Soviet Union's influence in Eastern Europe, which is eventually going to contribute to the rise of the Cold War after World War II, right? Because the US and Western Europe, they're trying to stop the expansion of communism, right? Not just in Europe, but around the globe, right? But the Yalta Conference is important because at the conference, the Soviet Union is going to expand its territory. So how does it expand its territory? Well, at the conference, it's decided that the Soviet Union is going to gain control over several Eastern European countries, right? Including Latvia, Lithuania, and Estonia, right? As well as part of Poland, right? So yeah, the Soviet Union is even going to get part of Poland, which was a part of their previous agreement with Germany before the war, right? These are all territories that used to be a part of the Soviet Union before World War I. So now it's like the Soviet Union is getting those territories back. Okay, the Baltic states, Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia, they're getting those territories back now, right? Because now they're part of the Allies, right? So, because remember, like at the end of World War I, Vladimir Lenin had pulled the Soviet Union out of the Allies. It was no longer part of the war, and the Soviet Union was not invited to the treaty conference at Versailles, which was where it was decided that the Baltic states, Latvia, Lithuania, and Estonia, were going to gain independence, right, and no longer be a part of the Soviet Union. So now the Soviet Union gets those states back at the Yalta Conference, and this is important because it's going to lead to the Cold War, because now the Soviet Union has expanded influence, right? Communism has expanded influence in Eastern Europe, and the United States and Western Europe are not too comfortable with that. So we'll talk more about the Cold War later, but just understand that that's the significance of the Yalta Conference. Okay, you're also going to see the development of the United Nations after World War II. So similar with the case of World War I, World War II is going to convince the Allies that there's a need for an international organization to prevent future wars. That's the point here, okay? And so the United Nations was established in 1945, and the United Nations consists of a General Assembly. This is where you have all the different member states, and they all get equal representation. And there's also a Security Council. So you got the General Assembly and you got a Security Council. And the Security Council has 15 member nations. Now, 10 of those 15 member nations are temporary. They hold those seats for 2-year terms, and they get voted in by the other member states in the General Assembly. Okay, so they get elected to the Security Council for 2-year terms, right? So that's 10 of the positions out of the 15 in the Security Council. But there's 5 positions in the Security Council of the UN that are permanent, okay? And the countries that hold those seats are Britain, France, the United States, China, and the Soviet Union, okay? And it's important because these countries have veto power over all of the resolutions that are passed by the General Assembly in the United Nations. Okay, and so the whole point of the forming of the United Nations is to try to prevent another world war from happening. Any war, really. They're trying to stop all wars, right? Political differences should not be resolved with warfare. They should be resolved through diplomacy, and so that's why the United Nations is there. Okay, but as we can see, warfare continues even with the United Nations passing resolutions to try to stop warfare. You still have countries that are trying to expand, like Russia recently, and to gain more territory.